Hello and welcome to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, the podcast show where I interview the most inspirational and thought-provoking leaders of today and unearth their unique stories of diversity and inclusion to help inspire, educate and motivate others to make the world a better place. Today, I'm absolutely honoured to be joined by McKelvie. Now, Liam is one of those inspirational individuals that I really think can't help but draw a vast following and people who really are inspired by his personal story. I had the opportunity to meet Liam, it was around about a year ago now, and so really delighted that he's on the show today. Now, Liam is a quad amputee speaker and also virtual speaker. He runs an organisation which is called ZeroLimbits, which is spelt with limits with a B in the middle, which is a really nice play on words. Now, what Liam always says is he's really passionate about unlocking potential using the power of mindset and inspiration. And he certainly does do that. He's going to be talking to us today about how we can all achieve amazing feats and how he's overcome his disability to be where he is today. So Liam, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks so much for being here, Liam. And I wonder, I know that you've got a huge presence now on social media, which is just fantastic. I know when we were speaking around about a year ago, you were kind of starting to get into the world of public speaking and you just launched your business. It was a very exciting time, so much so I'm so keen to have you as an ambassador for DAR Global. But I wondered, for those who perhaps don't know you as well, whether you might be able just to explain a little bit about your personal journey and how you came to be where you are today, why you're so passionate about everything that it is that you do when it comes to disability inclusion.
Yeah, I'll go back to the very start. The day before my second birthday, I fell ill with meningococcal septicemia, which is a hybrid of meningitis and sepsis. So it's pretty severe stuff. And in order to save my life, they had to amputate both hands and both feet. So that amputated up through the elbow on the right arm, above the elbow on the left, and both legs below the knee. So I can walk on prosthetic legs. So if you ever see pictures of me on a stage, I don't actually have feet. I'm technically walking on stilts. But I learned to walk on prosthetic legs within months of being amputated, and that was the attitude I had throughout my entire early childhood. It was I knew from an early age that if I didn't push my own limits and my own boundaries, I would never really figure out what it is that I'm truly capable of. So just by holding both my arms together, I am actually able to write, draw, look after myself. I live in a house that's more or less completely unadapted. And I seem to be doing quite well for myself. But in my teenage years, things were a bit different. I became quite anxious, and I flirted with depression as well. And I started to bring myself down in my own head. I didn't believe that it was good enough or that I could be accepted. And that led me into a really sort of negative frame of mind. So my story, now when I speak on a stage, it usually looks at the contrast between the mindset that I had in my early childhood compared to the mindset that I had in my teenage years. And this is kind of, this yo-yoing effect of my mind from highs to lows is continued even until this day. So after school, I got myself to university to study architecture. And after 2 years, I dropped out because I couldn't keep up with the pace of everybody else who was able-bodied. And I fell behind because of an injury that I gained on my leg. So I took a week off, fell behind, struggled to catch up. And again, I fell into that negative mindset that I did as a teenager. So it was after dropping out, spending a year and a half unemployed, completely aimless, depressed, anxious, life, I hit rock bottom. And that's when I realised that perhaps I could use my experiences of the highs and the lows and having to stay resilient through the tough times. Perhaps I could use that experience to teach other people to improve their own quality of life and their own outlook. So that was September 2018. I decided to become a speaker, and that's the journey I've been on since.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that, Liam. And I mean, I love watching some of your videos and some of the things that you post on social media. And, you know, I often, when I read them, I think, you know, I wish that more people would be willing to, frankly, be as vulnerable as you have been. You know, I think you're very, very outspoken, you know, when it comes to mental health and depression, and a lot of these invisible diversities. Of course, you have the visible, you know, diversities and disabilities as well, but to also be able to share what are some really kind of personal, you know, personal thoughts and mindsets. And I think it's really, I think it's really brave and incredibly inspiring that you are able to do that. And I mean, I guess talk me through, obviously, with the journey, which you describe very colourfully as kind of this yo-yo of emotion that has kind of walked throughout your life. And, you know, for those who struggle with depression and anxiety, and I join you on that journey, is there's days where you feel absolutely on top of the world, and days where you feel absolutely kind of at rock bottom. I wonder, you know, for you, some of the challenges have just been astronomical, I think, especially in comparison to many of the things that a lot of us go through that we would deem perhaps hard. And at those really kind of low points of your life that you have experienced, how have you managed to pull yourself out of those times? Because when you're in a pit of depression, and you know, I mean, I take antidepressants and anti-anxiety tablets, which, you know, as you'll know, they take a little while to work and kind of stabilize moods and things like that. But, you know, for yourself, what have been those coping techniques and the things that you've really used to allow you to jump a bit out of that hole and then climb back out again?
Yeah, it wasn't easy, especially the first time around, because the way I believe depression and anxiety works for everybody is it feeds on itself. So it just progressively gets worse, and the longer it goes on, the harder it is to break free. So when I was unemployed, the, the way I managed to escape it eventually, well, I say escape, I've escaped the depression. The anxiety is still there to an extent, but not even half as bad as it used to be. But it was this career. So right up until the day that I decided to become a speaker, I had no idea what I was doing in life. And I feel that this purpose for me is this whole pandemic isolation thing. I'm off the ball. Right? Until I found the career, I was kind of aimless, and for me, that I always struggled with that, because I always had ambitions as a child, and into adulthood when these ambitions weren't really actualizing themselves in my life. That's what I struggled with. So this career is, in my mind, what saved me. However, it's not been plain sailing. There's still highs and lows. There's still, so for example, it's Monday now, and I took 4 days off this weekend, and I've not done that in months, because I woke up on Thursday and I thought to myself, what's the point? And that still happens. I think I like to stress that it's natural for people to feel down now and again. You'll never entirely escape negative thoughts. But the thing is, now that I know what I've done in order to escape them in the past, which for me personally is my career, I've then, this month, today, Monday, I've got up on time and I've got head first straight back into the work, because I know that's what I used to treat myself. And it's to me, it's about having a purpose. It's about having a direction. And with this career, I help other people. That's kind of the point. And that's quite a positive thing, to have a purpose in life that's focused on other people instead of ourselves. So personally, that's what helps me. But I recognise that for a lot of people, their career probably won't be the thing that drags them out of the depths. To me, my advice to them would probably be find something that means something to you. That doesn't necessarily have to be a career. It could be family, it could be friends, it could be experiences. It doesn't matter. It's about understanding what it is that you enjoy and how you can then use that to create a better life for yourself. And as time goes on, the negative spells of thinking should diminish.
That's some really great advice there. And just to revert back to something that you previously said there about kind of having the 4 days off, I completely concur with you. And I don't know if you saw it, but I wrote really quite a long article on LinkedIn the other day. And I think I called it something like why it's okay to have duvet or down days, basically, and those days where you just, I mean, let's be honest, you feel absolutely shit. You know, you feel rubbish and you just cannot motivate yourself to do anything. Everything feels like it's 10 times the amount of effort and everything like that. So much so to the point that actually speaking to maybe other people carrying on with what is usual could be even worse. And sometimes it is fine just to take those off and say, do you know what? Actually, I'm going to be kind to myself and I don't feel like doing anything, and it is okay. You think, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, I think you and I, you know, both share a lot of similarities in a way, and also, you know, the willingness to want to succeed and to always have a positive mindset. But let's make no bones of it, there's always going to be some negativity. And I think what's great about you, Liam, is you make it real, because you talk about, you know, the bad things and the good things, but you don't fluff it up so that we are, you know, pretending that it is something that it is not. Everyone has crappy days. Let's call them what they are. But look, you know, you do get out of them. Nothing is perfect. Life is a roller coaster, an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. And so ultimately, if we can learn these tips and tools and tricks, like you say, and find what it is that brings some kind of happiness to us, we can keep working around it, and we can keep then reminding ourselves, you're only lying in bed and you're feeling rubbish, you know, reminding ourselves why we're here, who it is that makes us happy, what it is that makes us happy. And that ultimately, like you say, very, very selflessly, even though you've been through these difficult times in your life, actually, it's not all about me. You know, it's about other people, and it's about, you know, what I like to call servant leadership. And I think you are an absolute pinnacle of that, really, Liam. You know, it is, how can I serve others? And in serving others, I am also helping myself, but I am ultimately making the world of business and society a better place.
Yeah, so as you said at the end there, it's helping yourself and other people. Because in the minds of some people, it has to be all them or all somebody else. So if you take care of nobody but yourself, then you're going to isolate yourself inevitably, because other people aren't going to tolerate that. You're going to become selfish and narrow-minded. However, if you only look after other people, you're going to neglect yourself to the point that you're going to just wear yourself down. So it's about finding that balance. And if it means, well, on Thursday, for example, my first day off, I had Ben and Jerry's for my breakfast, and I don't regret it.
I love Ben and Jerry's. It is delicious. What flavour did you have?
I was cookie dough.
Oh, very good. I quite like that fish food one as well.
I've not had that one yet.
Oh my goodness. Oh, you've got to have fish food. It's kind of like caramel gooey. Oh my God, it's just delicious. It's delicious.
I think it's the name that puts me off.
Pardon?
I think it's the name that puts me off.
I mean, there's nothing better, is there? Sometimes a bit of sweet indulgence and Netflix and ice cream.
Everything's kind of slowed down in my life, and it's kind of, honestly, that's why I think I ended up taking the days off as well, because sometimes you struggle to see the future. So for a big part of me, and what keeps me going, is thinking about where I'm going to be in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years. And in some cases, it's thinking a month ahead, 2 months ahead, 3 months ahead. But at this moment in time, it's extremely difficult to do that. My entire business, my entire outlook is completely changed. It's been turned upside down. And because nobody's ever experienced this before, this whole pandemic, it's creating a lot of uncertainty, because there's no precedence. There's nothing you can look back upon and say, this is like when I did that. So this is basically the first time experience for everybody. So yeah, it's I'm kind of a little bit off the ball at the moment, but I'm not being too harsh on myself. Whereas if this was any other time, say for example there wasn't a pandemic and we weren't self-isolating, if I took as much time off as I've taken off in the last week, I would give myself quite a lot of grief about it, in truth, which is quite harsh at the best of times. But in times like this, you need to be a bit lenient. You need to understand that sometimes the rules of the game change and nobody quite knows what they are.
Again, I completely concur. And my true belief, and I know you share this as well, because I see some of the really heartfelt posts that you put on LinkedIn, and they're so real. You know, they aren't, you know, I see a lot of glossy facades of, you know, purpose and this, that, and the other. You know, what you put there is so raw and it is so real. And And I think from everyone that I've spoken to, I think there's a lot of similar feelings. And as simple as it might sound, really being kind to ourselves at this point in time has never been more important than ever. No, you're an ambitious, and you're a very ambitious and dynamic individual. And I think, people like yourself, and I certainly, suffer with this as well, will beat myself up if I haven't done something, and be my own worst critic. And again, you talk a lot about this with Zero Limits, but it is that mindset that is holding us back. That little voice in our head, or the devil sitting on our shoulder, that voice kind of saying, you should have done that, you've not done enough, or other people are doing more. And I think sometimes we do just need to stop and kind of reflect. And in a way, whilst it is terrible, the pandemic that we are going through at the moment, I think there's also a silver lining to the cloud, in the sense that actually, like you say, everyone is going through it, and really no one knows what the outcome is. We can analyze all we want, but no one really knows what will happen. I think we just have to stick to the fundamental human principle that we are all people, and we are all going through this journey together. And so none of us are alone, and hopefully none of us should feel alone, because there is a great virtual world there, which is open to us. And I think it's opened up the doors to more humanity, and in a way making the world a much smaller place, if that makes sense. So hopefully the power of talking, the power of sharing these fears and anxieties will help to get us there.
I think being honest as well is key. It's key for me anyway, but in particular now, I think it's a good time to be especially honest about how this is affecting everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people online, for example, are still pushing out content saying you still need to be doing this, that, the next thing, and if you're not doing it, you're not taking advantage of the opportunities that this is presenting, and you're not good enough. Whoa, slow down a minute. So a lot of people see the world in this kind of black and white view that there's a right and there's a wrong, where in a situation like this, no, there isn't.
Mm-hmm. Again, I know I keep saying I agree, but I do completely agree. And I think because of that digital world that you talk about there, and people saying push out content, it almost, that in itself can bring on a bit of anxiety. It's like even the news that I've been watching every night is giving the advice of not to watch too much news. And I think there's an element of truth in that as well. And if we apply that methodology to what you've just said there about social media and content, and of course you and I create a lot of content, and so in a way you feel like you're pretty busy with creating that content anyway, least of all then being even more busy with being forced to create even more content, which sometimes if you're not feeling like it and you want to be really honest and you want to be really true, well, you're not going to make up fake content for the sake of it, are you? And so that's almost devaluing your personal brand, and not being as real as you possibly could be. But I think if there is a possible answer to that, could it be that we reduce some of our social media consumption? Because in the same way that they say don't watch too much news because it can bring about that anxiety or negativity, could it be the same? Now, I know people react to what's happening in different ways, and yes, I agree. I think we can make opportunities out of this difficult time, but I think that also can be taken in two different ways. Opportunity as opportunity to be more humanistic and realize the power of slowing down a bit, and the power of being there for one another. Yes, and maybe the power of putting on specific mental health pieces like we are to help kind of address some of these things more, but pushing out senselessly more and more content, I think could have the adverse effect, almost like you say, Liam. So I'm not sure I'd agree with those people saying keep pushing out content and make the most of it, because I think it is, I don't know, could be deemed as a tad insensitive. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, my social media accounts are quite refined. Apart from my LinkedIn account's a mess. But say, for example, Facebook, I've got a limited number of friends on there. It's just kind of people that I know that I'm likely to speak to in the future, or friends, that sort of thing. And I don't really like any pages on it as well. I think I like BBC News, but no more, because I know that it's going to swallow me whole if I focus too much of my life on it. So for example, my business Instagram account, I follow many different sort of speakers and people who are generally in the same kind of category as me. And a lot of them are still kind of pushing, saying, oh, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, you need to kind of just keep going. Now's not an excuse. And to be honest, I think I spend on average about 30 seconds a day on Instagram because I can't be bothered with it anymore. I think a lot of, especially influencers and speakers, are still not being entirely realistic. Like, it may be their truth, but it's not really very relatable to most people. So when I put up content, for example, sometimes I'll be on highs, sometimes I'll be on lows, and I'll be completely honest about my situation and struggles I'm having. Because the truth is, there's going to be other people out there who are also struggling like that. And to reach out to them and say, look, do you know what, you're not alone. And that could do a lot of good for them, as opposed to just trying to think of the next best and motivational thing to just throw out there for the sake of throwing something out there.
I concur, and I think that the great thing, as you so aptly put it there, about being overtly vulnerable as opposed to the constant motivational clip number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, is that when you share those vulnerabilities and those concerns, like you say, people feel they're not alone. I think you're far more likely to come into contact with someone who will open up or be willing to write to you or to share their own experiences of hardship by opening up on the vulnerable side than you are about, I'm not saying don't be positive and don't be confident about achievements and such like, but I think there's a lot more people than anyone would ever expect that has got concerns or worries. And so actually sharing the vulnerabilities, I think, is far more important than almost sharing those highs, because actually it allows people to feel that it's okay not to put on this game face or a mask, which I know a number of us do when we go into the workplace or even in our personal lives, because we feel a need to fit in and behave a certain way. So no, I agree indeed. And Lim, I'm conscious of time, because as always when we speak, time just goes unbelievably quickly. And I wonder, because I know that you listen to the show anyway, whether we could go into a bit of a lightning round to finish things off for today. And also if you could give our listeners ways in which they might be able to get in touch with you as well. So first of all, I am going to start off with the kind of the biggest question in the lightning round, but I wonder, what has been your secret to success thus far?
Being strict yet lenient with myself. So understanding that balance between sort of productivity and sheer laziness, sort of burnout and laziness and kind of overdoing it. Understanding that sometimes in the morning, that when I wake up, I think, no, not today. There's times where I need to actually kick myself up in the rear end and say, no, get this done. Whereas at the same time, I recognise, just like at the weekend, there are times where I'm completely worn out for reasons that sometimes I don't even understand. And I do need to take time off, because sometimes you need a bit of time to recharge. So it's a strange balance of being strict and lenient. It's just kind of understanding your own capabilities and how to get the best out of you.
Great answer, and I think we all struggle with that balance. I constantly do find myself bouncing between, to use your terminology, that yo-yo piece with kind of energy. 1 minute you're kind of all over it, next minute it can be quite tough. And what about the biggest inspirations that you've had throughout your life, whether it be kind of work or in your personal life? Who's inspired you most of all?
That's a tough one, to be honest. A lot of people always ask me that, and I don't know, to be honest. At this moment in time, the people who inspire me most are people in similar situations to myself who are making the most of it. So I know when you ask me that question, a lot of people would expect me to list off some sort of celebrity or some specific person, whether it be a family member, friend, or somebody that I've met in the past. But as a whole, what inspires me is people in similar situations to myself that are then making the most of it. And there's a few of them out there. I couldn't name any of them specifically. It's just, when you come across a certain person, you think to yourself, wow, that's great.
Hmm.
That's what keeps me going. That's what inspires me to do better myself.
And it's having that feeling of belonging with people like that, isn't it? You know, we all, when we can feel that we are, or we have and share similarities with others, I think we naturally feel closer to them. And my next question, I guess, is I wonder, are there any books or podcasts or anything that you're watching which you're finding particularly inspirational or indeed educational that you might like to share with our listeners or those who are watching on YouTube?
Yeah, the book that completely changed my outlook on life was The Magic of Thinking Big by Dr. David Schwartz. That was the first self-help audiobook I ever listened to. It was over a year ago now. And just from that moment, I realised that, you know what, life is what you make of it. And I don't know, I can't speak for, I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't actually listened to that book. Perhaps things would have been different, I don't know, but that's certainly something that's has pushed me forward. And also The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle kind of shifted my mind spiritually. I was quite an extreme atheist before I read that book, and then now I've opened my mind. It's like I've been introduced to this whole new concept. So yeah, they're the two books that had the biggest sort of influence on my mind.
Love it. I love Eckhart Tolle. He's brilliant. I've listened to that audiobook so many times. In fact, it's one that I love to listen to before I go to bed, because I think you try and get back into that zone. So great choices there, and encourage anyone who's listening to go and download those books on Audible or indeed buy them. And finally, Liam, before we summarize for today, I wondered if you could go back all of those years and speak to your younger self, or in fact, to be able to speak to someone who is struggling and in the place that you formatively were before you found your purpose and before you started publicly speaking out about mindset and about disability, what advice might you give to the young Liam, or to someone else who's listening today who's having a challenging time?
Do you know what? This is going to be quite an unconventional answer, but I wouldn't say anything. I have this recognition that the reason I'm here today in this specific position at this stage of my life is because this is a consequence of every single thing that's happened in my life in that specific order. So I feel if I was to go back in time and say something to me, whether it be positive or negative, it could completely change my life into a different direction. So I know that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but I would honestly, I would say nothing. I feel that everything that I've gone through has been completely necessary towards making me who I am today, even the bad stuff.
That's a really interesting answer. And when you say that it's probably not the answer you're looking for, I never look for a specific answer. Now, you're the only person, the first person that's ever said that, which is what makes me even more excited, because I love to explore different mindsets. I think that's what makes us us. But it reminds me a little bit of, you know, the Butterfly Effect film with Ashton Kutcher in it. And I found that incredibly haunting and scary. It's almost like, in fact, the film Sliding Doors is one of my all-time favorites, where she's rushing to the tube, doesn't make it, and what her life would have been like before and would have been like after. And so it's a very philosophical answer that you've given there, Liam. It's actually not changing one single thing, because who knows, the tiniest little change could be completely adversely negative. It could be positive, but who knows? Better to go with what we are and to be happy in our own skin of what we have right now.
In order to become this speaker, this motivator, this online influencer, I suppose you could say, in a way, I had to go through university. I had to struggle, I had to drop out, I had to become severely depressed and anxious in order to overcome that, to then make me who I am now. So
thank you so much, Liam. And as always, I'm just going to do a quick summary of some of the learning points. And I mean, actually, today it's really easy, I think, when it comes to not only the difficult time that we're experiencing right now, obviously with COVID-19, but being ultimately incredibly, as much as you possibly can, being kind to yourself. Don't worry necessarily, as you said, what the whole world is doing. People are going to speak out. People are going to react in different ways, but don't feel under that unbelievable pressure, because really it's your own mind that's doing that to you, and it's the influences that you are absorbing like a sponge that are around you. So whether it be the news, whether it be social media, whether it be like Liam, only spending 30 seconds a day on Instagram because it makes you annoyed. Just don't do it, and give some kindness and give some time to yourself. What I love, Liam, is kind of you sharing your personal story. And I know in some way, shape or form, whilst not every single person listening to this will be able to relate to the physical and medical issues that you've had from childhood, I think what everyone can relate to is your incredibly unique personal story and the amount of resilience and courage and sheer grit that you have shown to become who you are today. Now, I know personally suffering from mental health and anxiety is a constant battle. And sometimes we need to be, like you say, kind of real and honest about it. Not everything is perfect. Not everything is, kind of rose-tinted glasses. Actually, accept the negative and the crap times, because we're all going to go through them. We can find other people who are similar to ourselves. And like you said, finding similarity in those that might be experiencing either what we have been through, or that we can relate to who have other issues. Say in the same way that I can relate to Liam, because you've got mental health issues when it comes to anxiety and depression. I'm sure there's many people out there, whether they suffer from invisible disability or a visible, diversity, or whether all of those diversities are, or disabilities, invisible, because many of them are. And I think, what you prove, Liam, is it is absolutely about the power of mindset. So, I want to thank you ever so much for being here today. You're a massive inspiration, and it's been absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're so welcome. As always, you've been listening to Diverse and Inclusive Leaders, and for all of today's podcast notes, if you've missed anything at all, or the fabulous recommendations that Liam's given when it comes to books, don't worry, because all of those will be on the show notes at the end of today's show. Make sure that you check out Liam's website as well. He's ZeroLimbits, and that is LIMBITS. It's all about motivation and mindset. If you want someone who's genuinely going to be real and not feed you with the classic motivational hashtags, then visit Liam. Honestly, you will not regret it. It's absolutely fantastic. And I very much hope will be an ambassador for us as well at DAR Global. Really, really wonderful story and things to say there. So my name is Leila McKenzie-Dellis. You've been listening to the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast show with Liam McKelvie. You can visit us at www.darglobal.org/podcast or www.leilamckenzie.com/podcast. All the show notes will be there, and all of the relevant links for Liam if you would like to reach out. And if you have been affected by anything at all in today's show, please don't stay silent. Get in touch on LinkedIn with myself or with Liam, or write into one of the team, and we will come back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thanks so much. Stay safe, take care, and see you again very, very soon. Thank you so much for watching the Diverse and Inclusive Leaders podcast. Please do feel free to hit the like button below, or if you'd like to receive future notifications, do ping the notification bell here at the side. If you're interested in the audio version only, you can find it on the following streaming platforms. Any extra info and descriptions will be in the links below. Look forward to seeing you soon.